My name is Myron Kandel, and I'm here with Jason Jenkins. He's the creator and CEO of AssetLock and was the 2014 Financial Advisor of the Year. Jason, tell me what AssetLock is and how it got started.
Thank you so much for asking. You know, AssetLock has a very interesting journey. It was truly a kitchen table idea. I had the opportunity to do a lot of research in the behavioral finance space. And I came to this realization after talking to some very intelligent people that study how we respond to investing and actually being an advisor myself. I realized that, yes, it's important to have a smart portfolio, but I also realized that what was more important was this emotional component. And there is this firm out there called the Dalbar, and the Dalbar goes back to January of 1984, and they've been tracking two very interesting numbers. The S&P 500, and how is the average investor done in relationship to that? And the sad part is that the S&P, if you go from 84 to 2013, it's done over 11, and the average investor, according to their methodology, has done 3.69. So the question's why?
This is percentage gain.
Yes, this is percentage gain. So when you think about the gap between 11.11 and this 3.69, that's a lot of wealth lost. And so I was curious, okay, what is the why? Like, why is this happening? And what I found in my research, as well as being a practitioner or an advisor, is that investors have a pattern of this buying high and selling low and, repeating that over and over. So I had one of those aha moments. And at the kitchen table, I said, okay, if this just comes down to emotions, then what if we could help clients stay emotionally strong? That was the question. I remember where I was sitting, and I woke up the next morning with that cup of coffee and I started staring at it. And I realized when the little cartoon light bulb goes off that clients, when they hire a financial advisor, which most people do, they care about two numbers. What do I have? And what are you doing, Mr. Advisor, to protect that money? And that's when I realized that we're actually looking at this the wrong way. And the follow-up to that was, man, I thought I was in the business of managing money because, that's what I do. And I had it all wrong. I'm in the business of managing people that have money. And that little twist allowed me to sit back and go, there's got to be a better way. And so what AssetLock does is that it monitors an entire portfolio on a daily basis. And it communicates in real time to that prospect what they want to know. What do I have and what's protected? So for example, an investor invests $100,000 and they decide that they don't want to lose, let's say, more than 5%. So day one, they're going to realize, 5% of 100,000 is 5,000. So their asset lock value would be 95,000. But the great part is, as those gains move up, the floor moves up with it. And the magical part that I get to hear from investors across the nation is they get so excited when they wake up one morning and they realize that their asset lock value is greater than their original deposit. And it's like this shed of emotions. So that's kind of the history of how AssetLock was developed and how it's helping people.
Well, who are your clients?
Our clients is we work with a select group of independent financial advisors across the nation, and they're able to offer our services to their clients. And so that's who we work with.
Now, what you're doing is telling investors, or protecting investors, I should say, against unexpected losses.
Yeah, I would say we're communicating with investors so that they have confidence in the portfolio that they're in. And so they have that peace of mind that if something gets really bad, that we're going to make sure that we have a plan to, again, protect what we've earned to that particular point.
Now, we know how clobbered investors were in 2008.
Yes.
Okay? You weren't in business then, were you?
No, I wasn't.
If you were, what would you have told them?
Well, we have our partner, Formula Folios, who our technology is with, their returns go back to 2007. So when you look at these different levels from 5% all the way to a maximum asset lock of 20, asset lock never would have been hit or it never would have been triggered. The idea is not to hit asset lock. The idea is to have a smart portfolio. But think of asset lock as kind of that insurance blanket concept in a certain way. And what I love about AssetLock, not because it's my company, but it's just I love that it's honest. It says these money managers could be wrong, and if they're wrong, thank goodness we have what? We have AssetLock in place. So it begins to remove the uncertainty because the investor says there honestly is a plan, and we all agree that we don't know tomorrow. And so we would have, in my professional opinion, I know we weren't in business in, but still knowing the principles in our partner, we would have saved people a lot of money.
Okay, so I give you I give your client my $100,000.
Yes.
And I say I'm willing to accept 10% loss.
Yes.
Right? Give me a scenario. The
Sure.
market goes down.
So let's just assume that day one, right, the market starts to decline. Two things are happening on behalf of that client. The first thing is that their portfolio has taken tactical measures to, let's say, slow that volatility, to do those kind of particular moments. But when it begins to breach a certain level, we're actually, AssetLock warns the advisor to say, hey, now it's time to have that conversation with that client. Because I get to speak to the thousands of investors that say, let me tell you what happened to me in 2008. I got a pat on the back and was told to hang in there. Or I didn't even get a phone call. When things get bad, isn't that the responsibility of the advisor to be there when things are tough, to have those conversations? And so we'll spark that conversation, but that asset lock value, if your advisor, let's say, is on vacation or you can't get a hold of him, guess what? If it hits the asset lock value, we sell those assets, or the money manager will, and we'll go sit in short-term bonds and look to re-enter at a future point.
So you're really an early warning system.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way to think about it, absolutely.
Now, on the other side of the coin, my 100,000 is now 200,000.
Yes.
And my 10% loss figure is 20,000.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. So what we're trying to do over time is move this floor up. Like, the concept is to lock in these gains, because the one thing that you'll hear in the investment world is wealth needs what? Time. But it also needs consistency in the sense of the impact of losses is statistically greater than the impact of a gain. For example, if I have 10% in my 100,000 I started off with, and I lose 10%, I'm down to 90,000. But if the next day we found that same 10%, how much do I have? I have 99, because 10% on 90 is 9, and 90 plus 9 is 99. And investors, really haven't yet, of what I've found, really understand the true impact of what those losses mean. So if we can minimize those, but yet keep investors disciplined and consistent in knowing, oh, this is just normal volatility, we're going to create more wealth. And that's what I feel AssetLock does. Because when I think of, since 1984, the S&P's done over 11, and the average investor has gotten less than 4, what if we could get that 4 to 7? And I think of how many people, their legacy could be greater, their retirement could be more enjoyable, and they could maybe do those things that they've always dreamed of a little bit more.
Now the market is so volatile these days, right? And is there a danger that the volatility over a few days span, or a week or 2 week span, decimates a portfolio below the level of accepted loss?
Yeah, I mean, so we are in the securities world, so AssetLock is not a guarantee. But the measures that we have in place, we feel very confident that we're going to be able to execute that on behalf of the client. Because again, like I was sharing with you, there are tactical measures that the money manager is doing. So it's breaking a certain point, and if they feel like getting out of that asset class, they're going to do that, because they're not investing solely in a single stock. They're using broad-based ETFs, mutual fund asset classes, and things like that. So they're really getting the best of both worlds, we think, of a smart portfolio with that security.
Okay, so volatility is really, or short-range volatility is not a big problem.
It's really not, because it's somewhat of a moot point, to be quite honest with you, when you examine the returns and those asset lock values. So we're not trying to make it tight, because then we could find ourselves getting whipsawed, right? All of a sudden we're like, okay, I bought high, I bought low, and I didn't get net ahead. The idea is to give a portfolio based upon its allocation some breadth. So for example, if I had an 80-20 portfolio, 80% fixed income and 20% equities, well, that's going to have low volatility. So that might have an asset lock of 5%. But if I go 100% equities, that might have an asset lock of 20, right? So we give the portfolio that breadth and that room to move, but yet there are those boundaries to it.
But every portfolio has its own boundaries.
Yeah, the most powerful thing about asset lock, in my personal opinion, is the personalization level. So I'm married to a beautiful wife, and my wife is very conservative with her investment strategy. So with her IRA, she could have an asset lock, let's say of 5%, where I'm a little more aggressive, and I could have a 20. So the key is the personalization. You know, this is about the individual investor. It's not pooled funds into one big pot and we're like, okay, here we go as a group. No, this is about you and that account, and that's what makes it exciting.
Sounds like communication is a very important part of your business.
It absolutely is. You know, just I guess in the silly example, I think that, you know, we think about trying to get in shape, you know, and lose weight or whatever that might be. You could hire this great trainer that looks, you know, all wonderfully in shape, and they tell you that, you know, in order to do that, you have to eat 10 pounds of kale a day, 10 gallons of water, and run 30 miles, and who knows what else, right? And the reality of it is that maybe if I follow that plan, yes, but they really didn't take the time to find out what I was willing to do. And that's such an important connection, is investors have to understand, okay, what can I afford to do? And that's really that blueprint back to our trainer. But the most important part is the willingness of how much risk am I willing to take. And so that is where we get a great marriage of success. And that application can be applied to many things in our lives.
Okay, but let me get back to communication.
Yes.
The old model was annual portfolio review.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't exist anymore.
No,
or
it
it should
doesn't.
not.
No, it shouldn't.
Right. So how do you relate to that?
How I relate to that is getting back to the word trust. Investors want to know that they have a plan that they can trust and have a partner with an advisor that is going to be there along the way. And so I define trust having two components, knowledge and transparency. They must constantly coexist in order for that to really be there. So having that knowledge transported constantly, for example, every time the account reaches a new high, we send out a text message and an email that says, congratulations, Myron, your account has just reached an all-time new high. We're exercising that muscle of like, wow, what I'm doing is working. This is great, this is exciting. But at any time, in terms of communication, you, the investor, can verify. And that is really where the beauty comes into play. I think of one of my favorite quotes from Benjamin Franklin where he said, knowledge gives the greatest return. And when you think about that, right, it's about having that knowledge base. And what we do at Asset Lock is we help have meaningful contact so that that knowledge is absorbed and they go, that makes sense to me. And I appreciate that. You know, sometimes in life, beauty is found in simplicity. And we think Asset Lock speaks the language that investors have been looking for.
You know, on the other side of the coin, what are you telling investors on the way down?
Great question. So at a certain threshold, we begin to communicate with them as well as the advisor at the same time. It's one of those things we don't want to pre-alert it too much, right? Because again, we're trying to control the emotions. But when it gets to a certain point where we're saying that we're getting closer to that asset lock value, now is it time to have that conversation. Letting them know that we do have asset lock in place. And that's where I think the money manager conversation gets tuned up as here's what they're doing on behalf of your money. And so again, it creates some accountability with the relationship with the advisor as well as the client.
Okay, but I'm a cocky guy.
Okay.
And I tell my advisor, sure, I reached my limit that I told you I was willing to accept, but I think the market's going to turn around.
Okay.
What do you do?
I think that's where a good advisor gets back to the very first day that they started. Remember those two questions? What can I afford and what am I willing? And a good advisor takes the time and has a very interactive process with their clients and says, Myron, do you remember when we sat down 4 years ago and we went through this, we stressed it from inflation and all these uncertain things? Well, guess what? That plan is still in place. And as your advisor, we need to stick to this plan. And that's the kind of advisors that we're working with, is they get back and they help their clients stay to center. And I personally think that's what investors are looking for.
It's not the pat on the back advisor who says, stick with it, things will get better.
Yeah, we're eliminating the hang in there conversations or I'm sorry, what do you want me to do? Everyone's in the same boat. The answer to that's no. And I personally believe that clients deserve better than what they've had in the past.
But you know, most people talk, you talk to an average investor and he'll tell you about his winnings.
Yes.
And they rarely talk about the losses.
Yes.
Right? That's sort of human nature.
It is human nature.
And how does that relate to you?
It's kind of interesting because every advisor that works with us and works with their clients, they get to sit down and talk about that downside. I mean, what advisor does that and says, hey, let's talk about making money, but let's also talk about the other way. What's that maximum side? So it's a very honest conversation. It looks at it from its totality. And so it's that environment where we're truly helping establish, I think, an environment for them to succeed.
So you're really an investment preservationist.
That's one way to put it. That's absolutely one way to put it, which is a good thing.
And what kind of reception are you getting?
It's been overwhelming. I get the privilege. I say this wherever I travel and speak. I travel quite a bit, and last week I happened to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and when I was done, this lady must have been in her 70s, comes running up and gives me this big old hug, and I've never met her. She says, Jason, thank you so much for developing this technology. Let me tell you how Asset Lock is changing the way I feel about investing. And she begins to tell me her story about how it's just making her let go and how confident she feels, and that how she loves knitting, and she's just, it was just this big glow in her face. And she goes, I know whatever that market does, I just turn down that TV. And what a great joy to think that we've done something that's really for the first time allowing people to let go. Because that's what it's about. It's about bringing honest and true value to the situation versus, well, I thought you were going to go make me this, and I thought this, and I thought that. And so I get to hear those kind of wonderful stories. And it's truly an honor to know that we're helping people.
Well, I had an old friend who used to say he would never buy anything that kept him up at night. And it looks to me like Asset Lock makes you sleep better at night.
It does. It sleeps better at night, and because, again, it's honest. When I think about it, that investors deserve so much better than what has happened in the past. And so if we can really put the investor first and really help them identify these boundaries, they can create a lot of wealth. The market has done that. But when I get back to those Dalbar studies and other studies that are out there, we can help them make more money along the way.
Well, going back to your original point, the S&P up 11%, the average investor under 4%.
Yes.
And that's largely, I guess, because they got out at the wrong time and got in at the wrong time.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And you're alleviating that.
We're helping to alleviate that in the sense of, what if that 4 could be 7? What if that 4 could be 8? Getting them to understand that, yes, volatility is there, but really defining it at a personal level.
But you're not telling me when to get in.
Our money managers have a process of doing that. So if we did have that Asset Lock, they use something which called as the RPI, Recession Probability Index, and there is very much a methodology, an intelligent way of re-entering. So there's not only the strategy of how we get out, which we're talking about, but we also have the strategy about how we do get back in.
I am being devil's advocate.
Good.
Because it sounds so rational, but many investors are not irrational, they're emotional.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you deal with that dichotomy?
Well, I will speak from what's happening is that we have thousands and thousands of investors that understand it. From engineers, PhDs, to a widowed mother raising 2 kids, doing whatever she can. And I get to talk to all of them. And I get to see that light bulb go, this is so simple. This makes sense to me because it speaks their language. As simple as Asset Lock is, it's so profound because of those 2 questions. I know I keep getting back to that, but the reception of it it's pretty overwhelming.
So I might say simplicity and rationality is your watchword?
They're definitely in the mix there. There's no doubt about it. They're definitely in the mix.
Jason, that's all the time we have, but thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.